The heat in Phoenix is unbearable. The thermometer on my porch reads 42 degrees, and that's in the shade. I sit in an old wicker chair, slowly sipping my iced tea, and watch the lawn dry from the heat. I'm 78, and I, Huxley Blackwell, have cursed this climate every summer for the past 15 years. Moving to Phoenix was not my decision. After the death of Eleanor, my wife, the house in Michigan became too big, too empty. Baxter, my only son, suggested we move closer to him. It seemed reasonable at the time. Now I'm not so sure. My life fit into a small one-story house on the outskirts of town. Bedroom, living room, kitchen, and tiny backyard. That's my entire kingdom. Life as a retiree is simple and monotonous, especially after 4 decades spent driving a truck. Roads, motels, roadside eateries, new cities, and endless horizons are all behind me. The phone rings suddenly, interrupting my musings. I hesitate to answer it, but on the fifth ring I do rise from my chair. My knee is aching again. The weather is changing. Huxley here, I say, though I know perfectly well who is calling. At this time of day, only Baxter calls me. "Hi, Dad. How's it going?" His voice sounds cheerful, too cheerful. "It's hot. My knee's acting up. But other than that, it's business as usual." "Listen, I've got news," he says after a short pause. "It's my birthday next Saturday, and we're having a party. I want you to come." I hum, pressing the phone to my ear with my shoulder as I pour myself more tea. "Does Rowena know you're inviting me?" The pause drags on. Finally, Baxter sighs. "Dad, it's my decision." And yes, Rowena knows. I picture her face at that moment, thin lips pressed into a string, cold gray eyes. My sister-in-law has never hidden her attitude toward me. To Rowena Preston Blackwell. She insisted on the double surname. I was always just an annoying nuisance. An old suitcase from Baxter's past that somehow forgot to be thrown away. "Sonny, I'll be there," I said at last. "What time?" 5 o'clock. "And Dad," he hesitates, "please wear that blue shirt I gave you for Christmas." Rowena prepared a special color scheme for the pictures. Of course, Rowena. Always Rowena with her rules and expectations. "We'll see," I reply and hang up. Baxter and I were close until Rowena came into his life. He was no longer young, 35, and desperate to find a life partner. And then she appeared in his travel agency. Spectacular, ambitious, 10 years younger. Rowena Preston, a marketing specialist, came from Boston, where her family owned a small chain of high-end boutiques. From the first time we met, I sensed falseness. She smiled, but her eyes remained cold. She praised my charmingly simple home in the tone one would use to talk about a dog kennel. Asked about my career as a truck driver with ill-concealed contempt. I saw through the act, but Baxter was blinded. 3 months later, they were married. 6 months later, our relationship with my son began to change. At first imperceptibly, fewer phone calls, more canceled visits. Then Rowena began to openly complain about my habits. "Huxley," she never called me Daddy or even Mr. Blackwell, "could you please not put your feet up on the coffee table? It's antique." Or, "Huxley, we prefer not to discuss politics at dinner. It upsets your digestion." And then came the innuendo. "Baxter, dear, perhaps your father would be more comfortable in a home for the elderly? There's medical staff there, and he wouldn't have to manage on his own." I lived alone after Eleanor died for 5 years, but suddenly I wasn't independent enough. Baxter always protected me, but less and less confidently each time. I was less and less invited to family parties. First, they stopped inviting me to parties for friends and coworkers. "That would be boring for you, Huxley." Then Thanksgiving. We decided to celebrate with Rowena's parents this year. Then Christmas. "We're flying to Hawaii. There are such discounts there at that time." Baxter's birthday I missed twice. The first time I received a terse message, "We've decided to celebrate as a couple." The second time I found out about the celebration after the fact when I saw pictures on social media. They included the entire staff of their travel agency, Rowena's parents, and even her cousin from Seattle. I called my son. He apologized, mumbling something about the sudden organization and Rowena's forgetfulness, who was sure she sent you an invitation. And now, for the first time in 3 years, I'm being invited to my son's birthday party. It's alarming. After the call, I go to the bedroom and open the closet. A blue shirt hangs untouched, tagged. I've never worn it. Too formal, too not me. Next to it are my usual plaid shirts, worn but comfortable. I slam the door shut without making a choice. I spend the evening as usual, watching old westerns on TV and rereading a worn Steinbeck book. I fall asleep in my chair and wake up at midnight with a pain in my neck. The next morning begins with coffee and blood pressure pills. The neighbor across the street, Wilfred, waves at me. He's 83 and he's the only person in the neighborhood who thinks I'm young. "It's gonna be hot today, Hux," he shouts across the street. I nod and raise my mug in greeting. This kind of weather talk is our daily tradition. After breakfast, I decide to visit another neighbor, Louis Turnbull. We met at the local supermarket a year ago when we were both complaining about the price of orange juice. Louis is 10 years younger, a former accountant with a stomach ulcer and a penchant for sarcasm. "A birthday invitation?" He marvels when I tell him about my son's call. "And you think your daughter-in-law has suddenly decided to make a relationship work?" I shrug, eyeing his collection of old vinyl records. Honor him. Maybe Baxter insisted. Or she needs something. Louis always thinks practically. "What do you have that would interest the Snow Queen?" That's what he's been calling Rowena since our one and only meeting at the town festival, when she defiantly ignored my greeting. "Except for the house," I grin. "But it's hardly worth her attention. 60,000, no more." "Did you make a will?" I shake my head. I've never really thought about it seriously. After Eleanor died, all of our savings went to pay medical bills. The only thing left was the house in Michigan, which I sold to buy my current place. I should get busy, I say more to myself than to him. When I get home, I find a card in the mailbox. It's a formal invitation to Baxter's birthday party, printed on expensive gold embossed paper. At the bottom is a handwritten note. "Hope to see you, Dad. Miss you, Baxter." It's his son's handwriting, but the words sound fake. Too sentimental for him. I suspect Rowena's hand. She always controlled his correspondence. Once I accidentally saw her checking his phone while he was taking a shower. I place the invitation on the kitchen table and stare at it for a long time. Something is going on and it's bothering me. Rowena isn't the type to change her mind without a good reason. In the 12 years of their marriage, she's consistently pushed me out of Baxter's life. Now all of a sudden, there's a gold embossed invitation and a blue shirt for pictures. That evening, I call my son. He doesn't answer right away. His voice sounds strained. "I got the invitation," I say. "Thank you. Don't mention it. I'm glad you're coming." "Who else is coming?" A pause. I hear papers rustling. "Colleagues from the agency. A few friends. Rowena's parents are flying in from Boston." I see. I don't know what else to say. "Should I get you something? Cake or wine?" No, it's all organized." He answers too hastily. "Rowena ordered the cake from Fenwick's, that French pastry shop downtown, and the wine has already been selected for the menu." "Good, I say. I'll see you Saturday then." "Saturday, Dad? Yeah. I'm really glad you're coming." We end the conversation, and I'm left sitting with the phone in my hand. Something's wrong. Baxter's never been a good liar. Even as a kid, when he broke a window with a ball or skipped class, it was the look in his eyes and nervous tone that gave him away. Now he's clearly not telling the truth. The next day I decide to do a little reconnaissance. I get in my old Ford and drive downtown. Fenwick's candy store is located in a trendy neighborhood, among boutiques and Michelin-starred restaurants. I park across the street and just watch. After an hour, my patience is rewarded when I see Rowena emerge from the glass doors. She looks as impeccable as ever. Cream suit, hair in a tight bun, dark glasses. In her hands is a small box with the logo of the pastry shop. Rowena gets into her white Lexus and drives away. I wait a few minutes, then cross the road and enter the candy store. It's cool inside and smells like vanilla. The young woman behind the counter smiles at me. "What can I do for you?" "Just browsing," I answer, looking at the display of pastries. "It's beautiful." "Thank you. Would you like to try our specialty eclair? It's on sale today." I shake my head. "Actually, it's about the cake. A friend ordered it from you for his birthday." "Baxter Blackwell?" The girl frowns, checking something on the computer. "Blackwell? Yes, I have an order for Saturday. A big Black Forest cake. 3 tiers." "Right." I nod. "I'm just wondering how many people it's for. I want to get a sense of how big the party's going to be." 25 people, she says after a moment's hesitation. I thank her and walk outside. 25 people. That means there will be a house full of guests, and among them is me, who hasn't been invited in years. On the way home, I stop at a bookstore. Baxter always liked historical biographies. I pick out a new book about Theodore Roosevelt, his favorite president. The salesman packs it beautifully in blue paper. At home, I sit on the veranda for a long time, thinking. Something is cooking. Rowena is up to something, and I find myself part of her plan. The question is, what is it? In the evening, the doorbell rings. I open it, and there's Baxter on the doorstep. It's a surprise. He usually lets me know when he's coming. Dad, he looks worried. Can I come in? I step back silently, letting him into the house. Baxter walks into the kitchen, sits down at the table. His hands are shaking a little. What's wrong? I ask, pouring him some water. Nothing. I just wanted to see you before Saturday. Make sure you were coming. I sit down across from him, looking at him carefully. The wrinkles around his eyes are deeper. The gray in his hair is more visible. 47 years old is no longer a boy. Of course I'll come. I promised. Baxter nods, twirling the glass in his hands. Rowena is trying very hard to make sure everything goes perfectly. I noticed, even sent an embossed card. He smiles weakly. You know, she wasn't always so demanding. We used to laugh more. I don't answer. I don't want to state the obvious, that Rowena only showed him the side of herself she wanted to show. And when she got him, she dropped the mask. Are you all right? I ask instead. Baxter flinches as if I've hit him. Yeah, I'm fine. I'm doing great. Business is booming. We're thinking about expanding, maybe opening a branch in Tucson. He's talking about work, but I'm hearing things he's not telling me. There's something going on in their marriage, something that makes Rowena suddenly decide to include me in the celebration. When Baxter leaves, I stand at the window for a long time, watching his car disappear around the corner. My son has always been a good man, too good, too trusting, and Rowena has used that from day one. I walk back into the kitchen and glance at the invitation lying on the table. The gold embossing glistens in the light of the setting sun. Baxter's birthday, Saturday, 5 o'clock in the evening. Whatever Rowena has planned, I'll be ready. Friday morning greets me with a headache. I open my eyes and just lie there for a few minutes, watching the light play on the ceiling. Tomorrow is Baxter's birthday, and I'm still not sure an invitation is a good idea. My son's visit 2 days ago only reinforced my suspicions. I could see the worry in his gaze, which he tried to hide behind talk of business and future plans. I struggled to get out of bed, feeling my joints ache. My knee is bothering me again. They're promising rain by tonight. It's rare in Phoenix, but I always know in advance. My bones have learned to predict the weather better than any meteorologist. Breakfast is simple: oatmeal, orange juice, and pills. 3 little pills of different colors are the companions of my old age. After eating, I call Louis. I've decided to order a cake after all, I say when he picks up the phone. Why? There's genuine surprise in his voice. You said the Snow Queen had already organized everything. This one will be just from me. A special one. Louis snickers. She'll kill you if you ruin her perfect event. Let her try, I grin, remembering her face the last time I saw her. Besides, it's not for her. It's for Baxter. After the call, I go to the same pastry shop where I saw Rowena. The French pastry chef, Monsieur Fenwick, greets me with a professional smile, but I see an appraising look. My shabby jacket and old jeans are clearly out of step with his clientele. What can I do for you, monsieur? I need a cake. For tomorrow, I say. For my son. It's his birthday. Fenwick nods, pulls out a catalog. We have a few slots available for tomorrow. What kind of cake do you prefer? I hesitate, flipping through glossy pages of photos of exquisite desserts. Then I stop. This one, strawberry and vanilla. Fenwick raises an eyebrow. Excellent choice. Victoria is one of our specialty cakes. We discuss the details, size, lettering, decorations. I insist on a simple design. No fancy colors or figures. Just the inscription, Happy birthday, son. Love, Daddy. When it comes to payment, I pull out my shabby wallet and count out the cash. Fenwick looks at me with renewed interest. Delivery or pickup? Self-delivery. I'll be there tomorrow at 3. As I leave the candy store, I pause for a moment, staring at my reflection in the window. Wrinkles, gray hair, slumped shoulders. When did I get so old? It seems like yesterday I was teaching Baxter how to ride a bike, and today I'm going to his 47th birthday party with a cake that will probably become a bone of contention. Next stop is the bookstore. I've already bought the Roosevelt biography, but that's not enough. Baxter deserves something special. The old Pages store smells of dust and paper, a smell I've always loved. The owner, Tobias Crimson, sits behind the counter, immersed in reading. He looks up and smiles, recognizing me. "Huxley, long time no see." "3 months, no more," I reply, shaking his dry hand. "At our age, a week can seem like an eternity." Tobias grinned. He's 79, a year older than me. "Looking for something specific?" I nod. "Do you still have that section with the first editions?" Tobias leads me to the far corner of the store, where the most valuable copies are kept under glass. I slowly peruse the shelf until I find what I'm looking for. Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby, first edition 1925. Not the earliest and not the most expensive, but still valuable. And most importantly, Baxter's favorite book. "How much?" I ask, pointing to the book. Tobias says a sum that makes my insides chill. It's almost half my monthly pension, but I nod. I take it. As he carefully wraps the book in a special protective envelope and then in gift paper, I remember the first time Baxter read Gatsby in high school. How enthusiastically he talked about Fitzgerald's language, the symbolism of the green light, how he reread the book every few years, finding something new. "A special gift?" Tobias asks as I pay. "My son's birthday," I answer. He nods understandingly. "Lucky your son has a father." I don't answer. If Tobias knew how infrequently I see Baxter, he wouldn't be so sure. As I return home with my book and the cake I ordered, I can't help but think back to the day 6 months ago when everything changed. The day I learned the truth about Rowena. It was an accident, one of those unplanned encounters that turn your life upside down. I was in downtown Phoenix on my way back from the dentist. I decided to stop at a coffee shop for a coffee before I went home. And there, in the far corner, I saw Rowena. She was sitting at a table with a man, tall, with a thick, dark beard and an expensive suit. I recognized him immediately. Perkins, Baxter's business partner. They'd opened a travel agency together 10 years ago, but I'd always felt Perkins wasn't the kind of man I could trust. Too smooth, too smiley. Rowena didn't notice him. She was completely absorbed in the conversation, leaning in toward Perkins so close that their faces were almost touching. I could see her profile. She was smiling, but not the polite, cold smile she was saving for me. It was a different smile. Intimate, genuine. I was about to leave, not wanting to be seen, but something held me back. I grabbed my coffee and sat down at the far table, partially hidden by a large plant in a tub. From here I could watch them while remaining invisible. Their conversation seemed lively. Rowena laughed often, touching Perkins' arm. He leaned even closer, whispering something in her ear. And then something happened that made me freeze with my cup halfway to my mouth. Perkins kissed Rowena. Not on the cheek, not fleetingly, it was a real long kiss, and she responded enthusiastically. I set the cup on the table, feeling my heart pounding somewhere in my throat. 12 years of marriage, and Rowena makes out with her husband's business partner in a downtown cafe. It was so blatant, so brazen, that for a moment I doubted what I was seeing. But there could be no doubt, especially when, after the kiss, she put her hand on his knee and slowly slid it up his thigh. I sat there for almost an hour watching the spectacle. They were discussing something, leaning over some papers Perkins had pulled out of a briefcase. Rowena looked focused, businesslike I'd never seen her before. She was writing things down, nodding, sometimes arguing, pointing her finger at the papers. In between these businesslike moments, there were touches, glances, another kiss. When they finally got ready to leave, Perkins paid the bill, and they walked out together. I gave them a few minutes head start, then followed them out. In the parking lot, I saw them get into Perkins' car, a silver Mercedes, and drive away. I stood there on the hot asphalt for a long time, trying to make sense of what I'd seen. My first thought was to call Baxter, tell him everything, but something held me back. Maybe it was fear that he wouldn't believe me, or that he would, but it would break his heart. Or that he would, but he'd rather stay with Rowena. In the end, I decided to gather more information. For the next few weeks, I watched. Twice I saw them meet at the same cafe. Once I spotted Perkins getting into Rowena's car outside the mall. And then in early April, I overheard them talking. It happened in a park near my house. I was sitting on a bench, hidden by a hedge, when I heard familiar voices. They were walking down the path, unaware of my presence. Baxter is beginning to suspect something, Rowena said. Yesterday, he asked me why I was late for work. What did you say? Perkins' voice sounded concerned. That I'd been at the spa. He believed it, as usual. She grinned. My husband is too trusting for his own good. Unky, when do we move on to the next phase? Perkins asked. I'm tired of waiting. Soon. I have to have all the paperwork ready. And then it's better to wait until his birthday. Why? Rowena lowered her voice and I could barely hear. Because after that day, he'll have no reason to stay with him. I've made all the arrangements. It will be spectacular. They walked on and I didn't hear the end of the conversation. But what I did hear was enough to know that they were planning something big, and it had to do with Baxter's birthday. I thought about telling my son again, but each time I stopped myself. What could I say? Your wife is cheating on you with Perkins, and they're up to something? No proof, just based on overheard conversations? Baxter would rather believe I had senile dementia than betray my beloved wife. Besides, there was another reason for my silence. Hope. The foolish, senile hope that if I was patient enough, if I didn't interfere in their marriage, that one day things would get better with my son. That Rowena would soften or Baxter would see for himself. That I wouldn't have to be the one to shatter his illusions. Now, as I prepared for the holiday, I realized that the waiting time was over. Whatever Rowena has planned for tomorrow, I must be ready. At home, I carefully place the book on the table and pull a blue shirt out of the closet. I cut off the tag, hang it on the rack. Tomorrow, I will look exactly the way Rowena wants me to look. I'll play by her rules until then. In the evening, Lewis comes over with a bottle of bourbon. We sit on the veranda, watching the sun set over the horizon, coloring the Phoenix sky in shades of red and purple. Are you sure you want to go? Lewis asked, pouring us each a second drink. My ex was one of those people, too. Manipulative. They never do anything for nothing. I turn the glass in my hand slowly, watching the play of light in the amber liquid. I have to, for Baxter's sake. Lewis hums. Your son's a big boy now. Maybe it's time to let him figure it out on his own. I shake my head. You don't understand. Rowena, she's not just manipulative. She's dangerous. In what way? I didn't tell Lewis what I'd seen and heard, partly out of superstition, as if saying it out loud would make the situation even more real. That she's capable of anything, and I won't let her destroy Baxter. Lewis looks at me for a long moment, then nods. Okay, but promise me you'll call me if anything goes wrong. I can come get you anytime. I promise. When Lewis leaves, I sit on the veranda for a long time, listening to the sounds of the Phoenix night. Somewhere in the distance, a police siren wails. A neighbor is walking his dog. I can hear him whistling softly. From an open window across the street comes laughter. A young family with 2 children lives there. Life goes on around me, ordinary and simple. And I sit here, a 78-year-old man, preparing to do battle with the woman who wants to destroy my son. I finish my bourbon and go into the house. In the bedroom, I pull an old photograph from the nightstand. Baxter at the age of 10, sitting on the hood of my truck. He's smiling at the camera, showing a missing front tooth. I remember that day. We went fishing and he caught his first trout. Eleanor said at the time that she'd never seen him so happy. I put the picture back and go to bed. Sleep won't come. My mind is spinning with scraps of conversation, images, unanswered questions. What exactly is Rowena planning? How is Perkins involved? And most importantly, how do I protect Baxter without completely destroying our relationship? I'm almost dozing off when the phone rings. The clock reads 12:30, too late for a regular call. Huxley here, I say, picking up the receiver. There's silence on the other end of the line. Then a quiet breath. Hello? I repeat. Dad. Baxter's voice sounds strange, like he's been drinking or crying. I'm sorry I'm late. It's okay. What's wrong? He doesn't say anything for a few seconds. Nothing. I just wanted to hear your voice. I'll see you tomorrow, right? Sure. I'll be there. I'll be there, okay. It's, uh, it's important to me. He disconnects, and I'm left lying there with the phone in my hand. Something's going on at my son's house, something he can't or won't talk about, and tomorrow it will be resolved. I close my eyes, but sleep doesn't come until just before dawn. The morning of Baxter's birthday greets me with clear skies and a dull ache in my lower back. I turn awkwardly in bed, trying to find a position that doesn't cause discomfort, but it's no use. Age is taking its toll, and no pill can change that. Glancing at the clock, I realize I've been asleep longer than usual. It's already 11. I rise slowly, wincing at the pain in my knees. I feel ancient, especially at times like this, like my body is betraying me, giving up on me piece by piece. Breakfast is skipped, but I take the pills anyway, washing them down with orange juice. 3 o'clock, I have to go for cake. 5 o'clock, I have to be at Baxter's. It promises to be a long day, and possibly a crucial one. The blue shirt is waiting on the rack. I slip it on, buttoning the buttons with naughty fingers. The unfamiliar color makes me look paler, accentuating my gray hair and wrinkles. Or maybe it's just my imagination. I look at myself in the mirror, a stranger staring back at me, a man Rowena deemed presentable enough for her perfect holiday. At 3:30, I drive out of the house. In the next street, I see Lewis fiddling in the garden. He looks up and waves at me. I stop. "Good luck today," he says as he walks to the car. "Remember, I'll be in touch." "Thanks," I nod. "I hope you don't need it." He looks me over and whistles. "You look like you're at a funeral." "Maybe I am," I reply grimly. "A funeral for my patience." Lewis laughs and slaps the roof of the car. "Don't let it get to you, old man. There's a cake waiting for me in the pastry shop, exactly as I asked for. Classic Victoria with strawberries and vanilla cream. A simple inscription. Happy birthday, son. Love, Daddy. No fancy decorations, no frills, just a sincere message. It looks great, I say to Mr. Fenwick, who personally brings out my order. Your son is a lucky man, monsieur. He smiles. Not every father has such attention to detail. I carefully pick up the box of cake and go outside. It's a hot day, as usual in Phoenix, but it's supposed to cool down by evening. I put the cake in the back seat and drive home to get my presents. At home, I check the packing of books one more time. A blue-wrapped biography of Roosevelt lies on top of Gatsby. I add a card with a brief message. No long confessions or moralizing. Baxter never liked those. Just, your favorite book. I hope it will always be a reminder that the most precious things are timeless. Love, Dad. At 4:30, I leave. The drive to Baxter's house takes about 20 minutes, but I prefer to arrive a little earlier. I don't want to be late and give Rowena something to criticize. Their house is located in an upscale neighborhood on the outskirts of town. It's large, 2-story, with an immaculately manicured lawn and a trendy, minimalist design. Rowena insisted on buying here, even though Baxter preferred something more traditional and cozy. When I pull up, several cars are already parked in the driveway, so the first guests have already arrived. I park on the street and carefully pull out the cake and gifts. Baxter himself meets me at the front door. He looks tense, but smiles at the sight of me. Dad, you made it, he says, relief in his voice, as if he doubted it. Of course I'm here, I reply, trying to hold on to the box of cake and the bag of presents. Happy birthday, son. He hugs me, trying not to touch the cake, and I can feel him shaking slightly. What's this? He nods at the box. The cake. I know Rowena's already ordered it, but this one's special. From me. Baxter hesitates, then nods. Thanks, Dad. That's very nice of you. We go into the house. Inside, it's cool and smells like flowers. The living room is decorated in gray-blue tones, as cold and impersonal as Rowena herself. About a dozen guests are already scattered around the room with glasses in hand. I recognize a few of Baxter's colleagues from the travel agency, neighbors, and, of course, Rowena's parents. Mrs. Preston, a tall, gray-haired woman, with a gaze as cold as her daughter's, looks at me appraisingly from her seat by the fireplace. Mr. Preston, a short, full man with a red face, pretends not to notice my appearance. Sure you. Let me take the cake, Baxter says, taking the box from me. I'll take it to the kitchen. Where should I leave the presents? I ask. On the table by the window. There are a few already there. I walk to the designated place, feeling the stares of the guests. Many of them are seeing me for the first time, even though they've known Baxter for years. Thanks to Rowena's efforts, I've become virtually invisible in my own son's life. I place my gift bag next to the others, much more expensively wrapped. Boxes in glossy paper with elaborate bows contrast with my plain blue wrapping. "Mr. Blackwell," comes a voice behind me. What a surprise. I turn around. Rowena is standing in front of me, flashing a perfect smile. She's wearing an elegant blue dress that matches the color scheme of the living room exactly. Her hair is impeccably styled, her makeup immaculate. She looks like a picture out of a glossy magazine, beautiful and completely lifeless. "Rowena," I nod. "Thank you for inviting me," Baxter insisted. She shrugged slightly. "You are his father, after all." Her tone implies that this is the only reason I'm here, and not a very significant one. "I noticed you brought the cake," she continues, and her smile grows even colder. "That was unnecessary. We already have dessert from Fenwick's." "I know, but I wanted to do something special for Baxter." Her eyes narrow. "Of course they are. How nice of you." She pauses. "I hope your, gift won't spoil the whole composition. I've planned it so carefully." "I'm sure it will be fine," I reply, holding back my irritation. Rowena is about to add something, but she is interrupted by the arrival of a new guest. I take the moment to step back and grab a glass of wine from a passing waiter. Yes, there are waiters here. Rowena always liked to impress. I spend the next hour watching from the corner of the room. Baxter moves from group to group, talking, laughing, but his laughter sounds strained. Every now and then he casts glances in my direction, as if checking to see if I'm okay. Rowena, meanwhile, plays the role of the perfect hostess, introducing the guests to each other, making sure everyone's glasses are full, keeping the conversation going. From the outside, everything may seem flawless, but I notice things that others don't. The way her shoulders tense when another guest enters, the way she constantly checks the time, the way her gaze becomes hard when she looks at Baxter. At one point, Baxter comes up to me. "Is everything all right, Dad?" he asks quietly. "Aren't you bored?" "Everything's fine," I assure him. "Just watching. You know I'm not much of a party person." He nods, then leans closer. "And, thank you for coming. It means a lot to me." "I wouldn't have missed your birthday," I reply. "How about next time we celebrate together? Like we used to, remember? Fishing, a bonfire, a couple beers." His face brightens, and for a moment I see the old Baxter before Rowena. "Sounds great," he says. "It's been so long since we've—" "Baxter," Rowena calls from across the room. "Come here, please. Mr. and Mrs. Atkins want to discuss their vacation in Italy." He sighs. "Sorry, Dad. Duty calls." I nod and he leaves, leaving me alone in my corner. A waiter stops next to me. "More wine, sir?" "No, thank you. I'm driving." He nods and steps away. I notice Rowena's parents watching me with obvious disapproval. Mrs. Preston whispers something to her husband, and he frowns in my direction. No wonder the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. At 6:30, Rowena announces that it's time for dinner. The guests move into the dining room, where the long table is set with impeccable taste. Baxter sits at the head of the table, Rowena at his right hand. I am seated at the far end between Baxter's roommate, whose name I don't remember, and some young employee of their agency. Dinner passes leisurely, a few changes, of course, accompanied by conversations about travel, politics, real estate. I'm mostly silent, occasionally answering my roommate's questions about the weather and gas prices. Suddenly, the front door opens and Perkins walks in. I can feel myself tensing up. He's almost 2 hours late, and it's clearly no accident. "Sorry I'm late," he says, walking into the dining room. "Got held up at the office." Baxter gets up to greet his partner, but I see Rowena give Perkins a meaningful look. He gives her a barely perceptible nod, then shakes Baxter's hand. "Happy birthday, old friend." "Thanks for taking the time," Baxter replies. Perkins takes a seat next to Rowena, and dinner continues. But now the atmosphere changes. Rowena is more animated, laughing more often. Several times I notice their hands touching under the table. Baxter sees it too. His face pales, and the hand holding his glass trembles slightly. He tries to keep the conversation going, but I can see that his thoughts are far away. After dinner, everyone returns to the parlor. Rowena announces that it's time for toast and cake. The waiter rolls out the table on which her order stands, a three-tiered chocolate cake decorated with delicate sugar figures. "Where's the one Dad brought?" Baxter asks, and there is an awkward silence in the room. Rowena loses her temper for a moment. "Oh, darling, I thought we were going to use the one I ordered, especially for the pictures. It fits the overall concept perfectly." "I want both," Baxter says firmly. "Father brought his specially." Rowena presses her lips together, but nods to the waiter. He leaves and comes back with my cake. He places it next to Rowena's, and the contrast is stark. Simple and sincere next to pretentious and ostentatious. "Before we cut the cakes," Rowena says, raising her glass, "I'd like to say a few words about my wonderful husband." She gives a long toast, full of general phrases about what a wonderful man Baxter is, how grateful she is for their life together, how proud she is of their accomplishments. But not one specific example, not one personal memory. It's as if she's reciting a speech from a memorized text. When she finishes, the guests applaud. Baxter looks embarrassed and a little awkward. "Is there anything you'd like to add, Huxley?" Rowena asks, looking at me with a challenging look. I stand up, feeling the stares of everyone present. "I'm not a master of long speeches," I say. "I just want to say that I'm proud of you, Baxter. Always have been. Happy birthday, son." It's short and simple, but Baxter smiles, a real smile for the first time all night. "Thanks, Dad," he says. Rowena makes a sign to the waiter to start cutting the cakes, but Baxter stops him. "I'll do it myself," he says, and walks over to the cake table. He takes a knife and carefully cuts my cake. He puts the first slice on a plate and holds it out to me. "This is for you, Dad, like on my 10th birthday, remember? You made the cake yourself then, too." I nod, touched that he remembers. That cake was awful, crooked and underbaked. But Baxter still said it was the best cake he'd ever had. Rowena watches us with poorly concealed irritation. She walks over to Baxter and takes the knife from his hands. Let me help you, dear," she says with a strained smile. "You're cutting two big pieces." I see Perkins discreetly leave the room, heading toward Baxter's office. Whatever they're planning, it looks like it's starting. "I can help too," I say, walking over to the table. Rowena throws me an annoyed look. "That won't be necessary, Huxley. We'll be fine." "I insist," I reply, picking up my cake. "After all, I did bring it." I can see her patience cracking at the seams. The guests watch us with growing interest, sensing the tension. "Give me the cake, Huxley," she says through gritted teeth. "You'll ruin it, as always." "Rowena," Baxter exclaims, but she ignores him. "I just want to help with the cake I brought myself," I say, holding the box tightly. "You never know your place," she hisses. "You never know when to back off." Suddenly, she makes a sudden movement, trying to snatch the cake from me. I don't let go, and a ridiculous struggle ensues. The guests stare at us with their mouths open. Baxter tries to intervene. "Please stop, both of you," he pleads. But Rowena doesn't stop. Her face is contorted with anger. Real, not feigned. In that moment, I see her true nature, and it's frightening. "Let go," she shouts and shoves me. I don't expect her to be so strong. I lose my balance and fall backwards, still holding the cake. The box opens in midair, and the cake flies after me. I land on my back, feeling the cream and strawberries flying around me. Some of the cake lands on my blue shirt. Some of it lands on the carpet. Dead silence falls in the room. Then Rowena starts screaming. "Look what you've done!" Her voice shakes with rage. "You've ruined everything. My perfect evening, my carpet, the whole party." Baxter rushes over to me, helping me up. "Dad, are you all right? Are you okay?" I nod, shaking the cream off my shirt. I feel a pain in my back, but I try not to show it. Rowena, meanwhile, is throwing a real tantrum in front of the guests. "I've worked so hard to prepare for this day. Everything had to be perfect. And she points at me with a trembling finger, he's always ruining everything, always interfering. You're nothing but trouble." She looks me straight in the eye, and there's pure hatred in her gaze. "Get out. Get out of our house now." The guests are shocked. Some avert their eyes, others openly observe the scandal. Rowena's parents look embarrassed but not surprised. Apparently, they know their daughter's true nature. Baxter stands between us, shocked and confused. "Rowena, please calm down. It's just a cake. It was an accident." "It wasn't an accident," she screams. He did it on purpose. He was always in our way, always standing between us. I rise slowly to my feet, feeling every muscle protesting. 78 is not a good age to fall. Baxter, I say calmly, it wasn't an accident. Your wife pushed me on purpose. What? Baxter looks from me to Rowena and back again. He's lying. She's screaming. He tripped on his own. I was just trying to help. I look her straight in the eye. That's enough lies, Rowena. I've kept quiet for a long time, but I won't do it again. Her face changes from anger to alarm. What are you talking about, old man? Her voice sounds less sure. I'm talking about seeing you and Perkins at the coffee shop downtown, about hearing you talking in the park, about your plans. Rowena turns pale. Her eyes widen with horror. Huxley, you don't know what you're talking about. She tries to maintain control, but I can see her hands shaking. Perhaps you need a doctor. At your age. At my age, I can still see and hear perfectly well, I interrupt, and I've seen enough to know what you're up to. Baxter looks at us, his face contorted with pain and bewilderment. Dad, Rowena, what are you talking about? What's going on? I take a deep breath. The moment of truth has arrived. Well, it's time to tell the truth about my sister-in-law, I say, looking straight into Rowena's eyes. The truth I've been hiding for far too long. Rowena takes a step back, her face whiter than chalk. Don't you dare, she whispers, but I don't intend to keep quiet anymore. The room was so silent that you could hear the ticking of the antique clock on the wall. All the guests froze like statues, afraid to move and draw attention to themselves. I stood in the middle of the living room, wearing the cake-stained blue shirt Rowena wanted me to wear, and felt my heart pounding in my chest. What truth are you talking about, Dad? Baxter's voice sounded hoarse, like he was short of breath. I shifted my gaze from the pale Rowena to my son. His face was a mixture of confusion, anxiety, and something else, perhaps a premonition. Part of me wanted to pull back, to say it was just a misunderstanding, not to ruin his life in front of all these people. But I'd gone too far. And more importantly, Rowena went too far. Your wife is cheating on you, Baxter, I said bluntly, without preamble. She's been cheating on you with Perkins for months. A collective sigh rippled through the room. One of the women gasped quietly. Rowena's mother slumped into the nearest chair, her face turning ashy gray. Her father, on the other hand, turned as red as a tomato. This is ridiculous, Rowena exclaimed, trying to keep her composure. Baxter, don't listen to him. Your father is clearly not himself. Perhaps it's an age thing. I've seen you two together, I interrupted her, not taking my eyes off my son. 6 months ago, in a cafe in the business center. You kissed, and not just a friendly kiss. Baxter turned slowly toward his wife, her face contorted with rage and fear. That's a lie, she shouted. He's making all this up to turn you against me. He's always hated me, always tried to destroy our marriage. And the conversation in the park? I continued calmly. I heard you two discussing some kind of plan, something that was going to happen on Baxter's birthday, something after which, in your words, he would have no reason to stay with him. Rowena opened her mouth but didn't utter a sound. Her eyes darted around the room, as if searching for salvation, or at least an ally. But no one rushed to intercede on her behalf. Even her parents watched in silence as the drama unfolded. Where's Perkins now? I asked, looking around. He was here a minute ago. Where did he go, Rowena? To Baxter's office. What is he looking for there? At the mention of Baxter's office, Baxter flinched. Something clicked in his mind, and he suddenly rushed toward the stairs. Don't you dare leave, Rowena shouted, but he paid no attention. Everyone heard the upstairs door open and close. Baxter went into his office. Rowena turned to me, her eyes narrowed with hatred. You have no idea what you've done, she hissed. Howie, you've got it all wrong. Then explain it to us, I suggested. Explain why you're kissing your husband's business partner. Explain what plan you were discussing. Explain why Perkins is upstairs right now, going through Baxter's things. Rowena opened her mouth, then closed it. Her cold mask began to crack. I could see the panic in her eyes. We have a business relationship, she began uncertainly. Sometimes it requires intimacy. Some of the guests snorted. It was such a pathetic attempt at an excuse that even her parents looked embarrassed. Is kissing and hugging a regular business practice? I asked. And planning something for her husband's birthday, after which he'll have no reason to stay, is also business? She tried to object, but Baxter shouted from upstairs, "Rowena! Perkins! What the hell is going on here?" Everyone froze. A moment later, there were heavy footsteps on the stairs, and Baxter appeared in the parlor. He held a file folder in one hand and Perkins' laptop in the other. His face was contorted with anger and pain. "He copied files from my computer," Baxter said, looking at his wife. "And he has the documents for the transfer of our company's stock. My stock, with my forged signature." Rowena turned even paler, if that was even possible. "Darling, there's been a misunderstanding." "Where's Perkins?" Baxter interrupted her. "I'm here," came a voice from the door. Perkins stood in the doorway, looking both annoyed and embarrassed. He was no longer trying to hide, obviously realizing that the game was over. "Explain this." Baxter tossed the folder onto the coffee table. The documents spilled out, and everyone saw the title of the first page, Equity Transfer Agreement. "It's just a draft," Perkins said, trying to remain calm. "We were discussing a possible restructuring of the company." "With my forged signature?" Baxter was practically shouting. "And why are these documents dated today? Why does it state that I'm transferring 70% of my shares to you, gratuitously, of my own free will?" Perkins glanced at Rowena, as if looking for support, but she remained silent, frozen in place. "It was Rowena's idea," he said at last. Rowena flinched as if she'd been hit. "Shut up, you idiot," she hissed. "No, I won't shut up," Perkins objected. "If we're caught together. You planned the whole thing. You forged the signature. You said your husband would never know the difference." Baxter turned slowly to his wife. "Rowena?" His voice sounded quiet, almost pleading, as if he was still hoping this was some terrible mistake. She straightened, realizing there was no retreat. "Okay," she said coldly. "Yes, Jeffrey and I are in a relationship. For 8 months now. And yes, we were planning on taking control of the company. It's your own fault, Baxter. You're so, passive. Always agreeing with everything I say. No ambition, no passion. You've turned our life into a routine." Baxter stared at her, unable to believe his ears. "You, you've been cheating on me all this time? Cheating on me with my partner? And tried to steal my company?" "Not steal it, save it," Rowena replied defiantly. "She'll never reach her potential under your leadership. Jeffrey and I could have turned it into something more. And for that, you were willing to forge documents?" Baxter shook his head. "That's a criminal offense, Rowena. No one would have known," she said. "If your father hadn't interfered." She gave me a hateful look. "Then it's true," Baxter said, looking at me. "Everything my father said is true." I nodded silently. I had no joy in this moment, only bitterness that my son had lived a lie for so long. One of the guests, a middle-aged man I didn't know, cleared his throat. "I think we'd better leave," he said awkwardly. "This is a private matter." The others nodded, clearly relieved to have an excuse to leave the scene of family drama. Rowena's parents didn't move from their seats, as if they were stuck to their chairs. "Yes, please leave," Baxter said without looking at them. The party was over. The guests hurried toward the exit, mumbling awkward goodbyes. Within minutes, the only people left in the living room were Baxter, Rowena, Perkins, Rowena's parents, and me. "You filed for divorce," Baxter said, looking at the papers in the folder. "There's a copy of the petition. It's dated yesterday afternoon." Rowena lifted her chin. "Yes, I was planning to let you know today, after everything was prepared." "After you steal the company," I clarified. She ignored me, focusing on her husband. "Our marriage exhausted itself a long time ago, Baxter. We both know that." "No," he shook his head. "I didn't know that. I loved you. I still do." Something trembled in her face, a shadow of guilt or regret perhaps, but she got over it quickly. "It'll pass," she said coldly. "You'll find someone else." "After I'm left without company," Baxter grinned bitterly. "Was that your plan? Leave me with nothing?" Perkins stepped forward. "Look, Bax, this all looks worse than it is. We just wanted to—" "Shut up!" Baxter cut him off. I don't want to hear another word from you. He turned to Rowena. 12 years, he said quietly. 12 years I trusted you, loved you, and all that time you've been, not all the time, she interrupted. Jeffrey and I have only been together for the last 8 months. Before that, I was faithful. What a comfort, Baxter said sarcastically. Rowena's mother finally rose from her seat. Rowena, she said in a trembling voice. What have you done? Rowena threw her an annoyed look. Don't tell me you're surprised, Mother. You yourself have taught me to get what I want by any means necessary. Mrs. Preston shook her head. I never taught you to cheat or steal. You didn't? Rowena grinned. What about the way you and your father expanded your business? By taking out the competition, forging documents. I know all about it. I found those old papers in my father's safe. Mr. Preston stood up abruptly. That's enough, he shouted. We're leaving. Immediately. But Rowena, Mrs. Preston began. She's a grown woman. Her husband cut her off. Horn, let her deal with the consequences of her actions. Rowena's parents headed for the exit without looking back. Rowena looked at them with a look that was akin to the resentment of an abandoned child. When the door closed behind them, Baxter sank heavily onto the couch, still holding Perkins' laptop. What are you going to do? Perkins asked, shifting nervously from foot to foot. With the documents? With the company? Shimon, what do you think? Baxter looked up at him tiredly. You tried to steal from me. Forged my signature. That's a felony. You're not going to the police, Rowena said. It would be a scandal. The company's reputation would suffer. And my reputation? Baxter asked. My life. They're already ruined. I walked over to my son and put my hand on his shoulder. You need to call a lawyer, I said. Right now. He nodded, pulling out his cell phone. No, Rowena exclaimed. Baxter, think about it. We can work this out amicably. I'll file for divorce as planned, but we can agree to divide the property without a trial, without scandal. Baxter looked at her with such disappointment and pain that even I felt uncomfortable. Do you really think that after everything you've done, I'm going to negotiate with you? He asked quietly. You betrayed me, Rowena, in every way. He dialed a number on his phone and retreated to the corner of the room, talking quietly. Rowena turned to me, her eyes burning with hatred. You've ruined everything, she hissed. Everything I've spent years building. You ruined it all yourself, I replied calmly. The moment you decided to deceive my son, he never would have known if it wasn't for you, she said, taking a step toward me. Akunim. You were always between us, always watching, suspecting. I hated every minute I spent with you. The feeling was mutual, I assured her. Perkins, who had been watching us silently until that moment, suddenly headed for the door. Where are you going? Rowena called out to him. Don't you dare leave me here. I'm sorry, Ro, he said without turning around. But I'm not going to wait for the police. I've got some things to take care of. You coward! She shouted after him, but he was already out the door. Baxter finished talking on the phone and came back to us. My lawyer will be here in an hour, he said. He advised me to keep all the documents and not to let you out of the house until he arrives, Rowena. She laughed, but the laugh sounded hysterical. You can't keep me here. It's illegal. As illegal as forging documents? Baxter parried. Either you wait here for a lawyer or I'll call the police right away. Rowena pressed her lips together but didn't move. She knew she had lost. Baxter turned to me. Thank you, Dad, he said quietly, for bringing all this to light. I know it wasn't easy. I nodded, feeling a strange mixture of relief and sadness. Relief that the truth had finally come out, and sadness for my son, whose life had just been shattered. I'm sorry for the way things turned out, I said sincerely. I hesitated to tell you for a long time. Why didn't you tell me sooner? He asked with a slight reproach in his voice. As soon as you found out? I sighed. I was afraid you wouldn't believe me, that it would only make things worse between us. And honestly, I hoped I was wrong, that what I saw had some other explanation. Baxter nodded, understanding. I probably wouldn't have believed it, he admitted, not without proof. We both looked at Rowena, who was standing at the window with her arms crossed over her chest. Her perfect hair was disheveled, her makeup smeared from the tears she must have been trying to hold back. "What's going to happen now?" I asked my son. He shrugged. "I don't know. Divorce, obviously. Dealing with the company, with Perkins. Probably a criminal case. It'll be long and unpleasant. I'll be there for you," I promised. "Whatever I can do to help, I will." He smiled weakly. "I know, Dad. Thank you." Rowena turned to us suddenly. "You both think you've won," she said bitterly. "But you haven't. You're going to lose the company anyway, Baxter. Maybe not today, but soon. You're too soft for this business. You always have been." "Maybe," Baxter agreed. "Cheerum. But if I do lose it, it won't be because of a betrayal by the people closest to me." She snorted. "The people closest to you? You don't even know what it means to be truly close. You've always been far away in your thoughts, in your books, in your memories of your perfect childhood with your perfect father." She cast a dismissive glance in my direction, and I was just part of the interior, comfortable, predictable. "That's not true," Baxter countered. "I loved you, I did. But not enough to see the real me," she said with sudden sadness. "You only saw what you wanted to see. The perfect wife, the perfect marriage." Baxter shook his head. "I saw the real you, Rowena, and I loved you for who you are, with all your faults. It was you who couldn't accept me, my father, my life." She turned away, not wanting to continue the conversation, or perhaps not knowing what to say. We sat in silence, waiting for the lawyer to arrive, each absorbed in our own thoughts, each trying to realize how much life had changed in the last hour. I looked at my son and daughter-in-law, whose marriage had just crumbled before my eyes, and felt a strange calm. Not joy, not triumph, but a certainty that I had done the right thing. The truth, however painful, is always better than a lie. Outside the window, a thunderstorm was beginning to brew. The first in Phoenix in weeks. Heavy raindrops pounded against the glass, as if trying to wash away everything that had happened in this house today. But some things even the heaviest rain won't wash away. Baxter's lawyer, Walter Prescott, arrived exactly an hour later, as promised. By then, the rain had intensified into a torrential downpour, a rare occurrence for Phoenix. The drops pounded on the roof of the house, creating an unsettling but oddly soothing backdrop for what was going on inside. Prescott appeared to be a gaunt, middle-aged man with attentive eyes and a neat graying beard. He entered the house, shaking off his umbrella, and gave us a professional look, assessing the situation instantly. "Baxter," he nodded to my son, shaking his hand. "Mrs. Blackwell," he added, glancing at Rowena, who didn't even dignify him with a glance. Baxter introduced me, and the lawyer shook my hand politely. "Let's go into the study," Baxter suggested. "There I'll show you the documents." We went upstairs, Baxter, Prescott, and I. Rowena remained in the living room, still standing at the window, looking out at the rain. Baxter's office was a mess, the result of Perkins's hasty search. Desk drawers were pulled out, papers scattered on the floor. The computer was on, several folders of financial documents open on the screen. "Here's what I found." Baxter handed the lawyer the folder of documents he'd been holding earlier. "A stock transfer agreement with my forged signature, and the divorce petition Rowena filed yesterday." Prescott scrutinized the papers, occasionally frowning or making notes in a small notebook. "And this," Baxter pointed to Perkins' laptop on the table, "contains even more evidence. There's electronic copies of documents, correspondence between them, even photographs." "Photographs?" I interjected. Baxter nodded, his face contorted in pain. "Personal, intimate. They didn't hide their relationship, at least not in their email correspondence." Prescott went through the contents of the laptop, methodically opening folders and files. "This is serious," he said finally. "Document forgery, attempted fraud, maybe even corporate espionage. We have all the grounds for a criminal case." "And the divorce?" Baxter asked. "Shucks for him." "With this evidence," Prescott pointed to the screen, "the court will be completely on your side. Infidelity, attempted financial dishonesty are all factors that will strongly influence the court's decision in dividing the property." Baxter sighed heavily, sinking back into his chair. "I never thought it would come to this. 12 years of marriage." I put my hand on his shoulder, not knowing what to say. No words could ease his pain at this moment. I'd recommend changing all the passwords immediately, Prescott said, to bank accounts, email, company systems, and meet with your business lawyer first thing tomorrow to discuss protecting the company's assets. Baxter nodded, mechanically following the lawyer's instructions. He looked devastated, as if all his strength had left him. What about Rowena? I asked. She's still downstairs. What do we do with her? Technically, until the divorce is finalized, this is her house as much as Baxter's, Prescott answered. We can't force her to leave, but given the circumstances, it would be wise for one of you to move in temporarily. I'm not leaving my own home, Baxter said firmly, especially now that I know what she's capable of. Prescott nodded. I see. In that case, I suggest you do the following. Gather all important documents, valuables, and essentials. Keep them with you or in a safe place. Don't leave anything important unattended. Do you think she might steal something? Baxter asked bitterly. I think that in a divorce situation, especially one so unpleasant, it's better to be safe, replied the lawyer diplomatically. We went downstairs and I was surprised to find Rowena gone. She wasn't in the living room, nor was she in the kitchen. Rowena, Baxter called out, going around the first floor. There was no reply. We heard a noise upstairs, in the bedroom. As we went upstairs, we saw Rowena frantically packing her things into a large suitcase. What are you doing? Baxter asked, stopping in the doorway. She didn't even turn around. What do you think I'm doing? Leaving. I'm not going to stay in this house a minute longer than necessary. Where are you going to go? None of your business, she cut off, tossing the designer dresses and shoes into her suitcase. But if you're so interested, to my parents' house. Temporarily. What about Perkins? I couldn't resist asking. Wasn't he the one you were supposed to go to? Rowena gave me a searing look. Perkins is a coward and a traitor. He ran away at the first sign of trouble. Just as I expected, though. She slammed the suitcase shut and straightened, looking at us defiantly. You both think you've won, don't you? Ruined my plans, ripped off my masks. But it's not over. Far from over. Rowena, Baxter said tiredly, stop it. We have all the evidence. Letters, documents, photographs. You lost. Lost the battle, perhaps, she said with cold certainty, but not the war. I have my own trumps you don't even know about. Like what, for instance? Prescott asked, watching the scene with professional interest. Rowena gave him a scornful look. As if I would reveal my cards to you. But believe me, Mr. What's your name? Prescott. Mr. Prescott. Believe me, I'm not the kind of woman who gives up without a fight. She picked up the suitcase and headed for the door, but Baxter blocked her way. Keys to the house, he said, holding out his hand. She grinned. Really? You kick me out of my own house and demand my keys? This house was bought with my money, in my name, Baxter said firmly. And after what you've done, you have no right to be here. Sure. My lawyer would argue with that, Rowena parried, but still pulled the keys out of her purse and tossed them on the floor at Baxter's feet. Enjoy your empty victory. With those words, she left the room, heels clacking loudly on the stairs. A few minutes later, we heard the front door slam and then the engine of her car start. Baxter slowly sank down on the edge of the bed, looking nowhere. I can't believe this is all happening, he said quietly. How could I have been so blind? Don't blame yourself, I said, sitting down next to him. People see what they want to see, especially when it comes to those we love. Prescott coughed delicately. I'll leave you alone for a while, he said. I have some calls to make. I suggest we meet in my office tomorrow to discuss the way forward. Baxter nodded and the lawyer left the room, leaving us alone. How did you take it, Dad? Baxter suddenly asked. All these years. She was awful to you, tried to cut you out of my life. And I let it happen. I sighed, searching for words. I put up with it because you're my son, and I wanted to be a part of your life on any terms. Even if it meant putting up with abuse and neglect? Even so, I nodded. Besides, I could see that you were happy, or thought you were. That was the most important thing to me. Baxter shook his head. I wasn't happy, not really. Somewhere deep inside, I always felt that something was wrong, but it was easier to ignore that feeling than to admit the truth. He stood up and walked over to the window, looking out at the rain that was still pouring down in a wall. You know what the worst part is? I still love her, despite everything she's done. It'll pass, I said, even though I wasn't sure it would. Love is a strange thing. Sometimes it lives even when it should have died long ago. I should have noticed the signs, Baxter continued. Her late returns, secret phone calls, sudden business trips, all classic signs of infidelity, like a cheap novel. People see what they're willing to see, I repeated. Sorn, they don't see what hurts. Baxter turned to me. How are you? Is your back okay? After that fall, I waved my hand. It's nothing. It hurts a little, but it's nothing serious. At my age, everything always hurts a little. He smiled weakly, and I saw in him the little boy I'd taught to ride a bike, to fish, to tie a tie. I want you to stay, he said suddenly, for the night. I don't want to be alone in this house. Sure, I agreed, even though I wasn't ready for a sleepover and hadn't even brought a toothbrush. I'll stay as long as it takes. We went downstairs where Prescott was finishing up a phone call. Tomorrow at 9 in my office, he said, putting the phone away. Also, Baxter, I'd recommend changing the password on the alarm system, just in case. When the lawyer left, Baxter set about changing the passwords, first to the alarm system, then to the computer, the bank accounts, and everything else Prescott had advised. I, meanwhile, had tidied up the living room, cleaning up the remnants of the failed party. I wiped the cake cream off the carpet, picked up the scattered napkins and glasses. One of the presents, mine, remained unopened on the table. Sumantur. You didn't open your present, I remarked as Baxter came downstairs, finished with the passwords. He looked at the blue bag as if he were seeing it for the first time. Right, he said, taking the bag. With all this, I completely forgot. He pulled out the Roosevelt biography first, smiled, flipped through a few pages. Then his hand fumbled for a second package, and I saw his face change when he realized what it was. Gatsby? He looked at me in amazement. A first edition? I nodded. Yeah, not the earliest, but still rare. Dad, this must have cost a fortune. Don't worry about the cost, I dismissed it. It's your favorite book. I wanted you to have something special. Baxter opened it carefully, ran his fingers over the yellowed pages. Thank you, he said quietly. It's the best gift I've ever gotten. We spent the rest of the evening in quiet conversations. Baxter talked about the company, about the problems he now saw more clearly, about the suspicious actions of Perkins that he had ignored before. He's been gradually pulling me away from making important decisions, Baxter admitted. Said he didn't want to bother me with the little things. I believed he was just looking out for me. Shuri, what are you going to do with the company, which I asked. Baxter shrugged his shoulders. No, I don't know. Maybe I'll sell my share and start over, or try to regain control. But one thing I do know is that I can't trust Perkins anymore. Even if he hadn't slept with my wife, his actions with the documents are a betrayal I can't forgive. I nodded, understanding his determination. Whatever you decide, I will support you. When it was time to go to bed, Baxter escorted me to the guest room, where I had never been before. Rowena always found excuses not to let me stay the night. The towels are in the closet, Baxter said. I'll give you my pajamas and toothbrush. Thanks, I nodded. But don't worry about pajamas. I can sleep in a t-shirt. Baxter insisted, and soon returned with pajamas, a toothbrush, and even slippers. Good night, Dad, he said, standing in the doorway. Thank you. For everything. Good night, son, I replied. Tomorrow would be another day. When he left, I lay awake for a long time, listening to the rain drumming on the roof. I thought about Rowena, about Baxter, about all the years we'd lost because of her manipulations, about how she'd gradually distanced us from each other, how she'd limited our communication, how she'd tried to erase me from my son's life. But most of all, I thought about the future, that now that the truth was out, Baxter and I had a chance to rebuild what was broken, to regain the closeness we had before Rowena came into his life. Around 3 in the morning, I heard a sound, a quiet tinkling, like someone fiddling with the front door lock. I sat up in bed listening. The sound repeated, and then there was a muffled knocking, as if someone was trying to open the door but couldn't. I got up quietly and left the room. In the hallway, I ran into Baxter, who was also awake. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. I nodded. We walked down the stairs together, trying not to make any noise. We stopped at the front door, listening. Silence. Then again, a quiet tinkling. Baxter went to the alarm panel and turned on the outside lights. Through the window next to the door, we saw Rowena, wet from the rain, trying to put the key in the lock. Apparently, she'd forgotten that Baxter had changed the locks. "What are you doing?" Baxter asked, opening the door. Rowena flinched, clearly not expecting to be caught out. In the porch light, I could see that her makeup was smeared, her eyes red from tears or alcohol, or maybe both. "I live here, in case you've forgotten," she said, trying to maintain her dignity, but her voice shook. "I forgot something." "At 3 o'clock in the morning?" Baxter asked skeptically. "What exactly did you forget?" She faltered. "My jewelry and my papers." "What kind of papers?" "Personal," she cut off. "Juana Nantian, you have no right to keep my things." Baxter sighed. "Rowena, you're drunk, and this is not a good time to visit. Come back tomorrow afternoon and take what you want. But now, please leave." Her face contorted with anger. "You can't tell me what to do. This is my house as much as it is yours, and I'm coming in whether you want me to or not." She tried to squeeze past Baxter, but he gently but firmly blocked her way. "No, Rowena, not tonight. Go away, please." "You'll regret this," she hissed, backing away. "I swear you will regret it bitterly." She turned and walked to her car, staggering in her high heels. Baxter closed the door, turned on the alarm, and turned to me. "Did you see her eyes?" he asked. "She's not just drunk. She's on edge." I nodded, feeling anxious. "Be careful, son. People like Rowena, when cornered, become truly dangerous." Baxter stared at the closed door for a long time, as if he could see through it the retreating figure of his ex-wife. "Do you know what the strangest thing is?" he finally said. "I'm relieved. It's like a huge weight has been lifted off my shoulders. All this time I've been living a lie without even realizing it. And now, despite all the pain and betrayal, I can finally see the truth. And it's, liberating." I put my hand on his shoulder, and we stood like that for a while, listening to the rain pounding on the roof and windows. Two people bound not only by blood, but by shared experience, shared pain, and now shared hope for the future. The next 2 weeks flew by in a whirlwind of events. I stayed at Baxter's house, moving necessary items from my home. We decided it was best to stick together until the situation stabilized. Besides, I didn't want to leave my son alone during such a difficult time. The morning after the cake scene began with a visit to Attorney Prescott's office. Baxter looked exhausted. He had had a restless night full of troubling thoughts and short periods of heavy sleep. I wasn't feeling any better. Age and stress were taking their toll. Prescott's office was in a modern glass and steel building in downtown Phoenix. It was cool and quiet inside, and the walls were decorated with diplomas and photographs of the attorney with various important clients. "So," Prescott began as we settled into his spacious office, "I've reviewed the materials you've provided, and we have a very strong case. Forged documents, attempted fraud, infidelity all play in our favor in divorce proceedings." Baxter nodded, fiddling with a ballpoint pen. "What about the company? Could he and Perkins hurt the business in any way?" "That depends on the structure of your partnership and the articles of incorporation," Prescott replied. "But I would recommend that you immediately block Perkins' access to all company accounts and systems. And an audit, the sooner the better." "I've already done that," Baxter said. "Our CTO changed all the passwords last night." "Good," Prescott nodded. "Now about the divorce. I've prepared a counterclaim where I've stated all the facts of infidelity and fraud. This will allow us to demand the division of property in your favor." Baxter sighed. "I don't want to leave Rowena destitute," he said, "despite everything that has happened." I looked at my son with wonder and pride. Even after such a betrayal, he was still an honorable man. Prescott frowned slightly. "I understand your feelings, but in this situation, generosity can be perceived as weakness. Rowena had already shown that she was willing to go to the extreme." "Still," Baxter insisted, "I don't want to sink to her level. We can offer her a reasonable arrangement." Prescott shrugged his shoulders. "That's your right, but be prepared for her to see it as an opportunity for manipulation." After meeting with the lawyer, we drove to Baxter's company office. On the way, I noticed how tense my son was gripping the steering wheel. "Are you okay?" I asked him. "I'm not sure," he answered after a pause. "Perkins was my friend, or so I thought. We'd started the business from scratch, gone through all the difficulties together. And now," he shook his head, "I don't know how to look him in the eye." "You don't have to do it today," I pointed out. "You can leave it to the lawyers." Baxter shook his head. "No, I have to do it myself. This is my business, my life. I'm not going to let Perkins or Rowena take that away from me." An atmosphere of tense anticipation greeted us in the office. News of the scandal at Baxter's birthday party had already spread among the staff. Things like this were hard to hide. People cast curious glances at us, but quickly turned away when we looked in their direction. Perkins sat in his office as if nothing had happened. When we entered, he looked up from his computer and tried his usual confident smile, but it was unconvincing. "Baxter," he nodded. "Mr. Blackwell, to what do I owe this early visit?" Baxter put a folder of papers on the table. "This is a notice of termination of partnership," he said calmly, "and a request to leave the company premises within the hour." Perkins' smile disappeared. "You can't get rid of me that easily," he said. "I have 30% of the stock, which will be frozen pending the outcome of the corporate fraud investigation," Baxter parried. "We found other forged documents, Jeffrey, not just the ones involving me personally." Perkins went pale. "I don't know what you mean." "Sure you do," Baxter interrupted him. "NAR, fake accounts, fictitious clients, double bookkeeping. We found it all, and we gave copies to the IRS. I watched this exchange with silent pride. My son was showing the grit I'd always seen in him, but which Rowena had so successfully suppressed all these years. "It was Rowena's idea," Perkins muttered, losing his composure. "All those schemes. She said that's what all successful companies do. Sacrum." "And you agreed, of course," Baxter said dryly, "out of pure love for her, without any profit to yourself." Perkins lowered his gaze. "I just, in love. She's so convincing." "Convincing," Baxter repeated. "Yeah, that's the word. So convincing that you were willing to betray your friend, steal from the company, and maybe go to jail." "What are you going to do?" Perkins asked after a pause. "If you voluntarily turn over your shares to the company at a fair price and sign a confession of fraud, I won't file a criminal complaint," Baxter replied. "That's the best offer you'll get." Perkins looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, I'll take it." When we left his office, Baxter took a deep breath as if he were shaking off a heavy weight. "One down," he said. That left Rowena. But Rowena was not so simple. When we returned home that afternoon, we discovered that she had changed all the locks in the house while we were away. We stood in front of our own door, unable to get in. "This is ridiculous," Baxter muttered, pressing the bell button. "She can't seriously think this is going to work." Rowena opened the door with a triumphant smile. "Ah, there you are," she said, as if she'd been expecting us for tea. "Surprised?" "Oh, Rowena, this is my house," Baxter said tiredly. "You can't just change the locks." "Our home," she corrected, "and I can do whatever I want until the divorce is finalized. Ask your lawyer." "What do you want?" Baxter asked bluntly. Her smile grew wider. "To talk. In private." She gave me a pointed look. "Anything you have to say, you can say in front of my father," Baxter said firmly. Rowena pressed her lips together. "As you wish, but don't say later that I didn't offer a civilized solution." She stepped back, allowing us to enter. Inside, the house looked different. Some things had been moved, others were gone. On the table in the living room were papers, neatly laid out as if for a presentation. "I've prepared a new property division agreement," Rowena said, pointing to the papers. "Very generous, in my opinion." Baxter took the top sheet and ran his eyes over it. "You want the house, the car, half the company, and alimony?" He laughed, but without mirth. "After what you've done—" "I was your wife for 12 years, she said defiantly. "I'm entitled to compensation." "For what? For cheating? For trying to steal from me? For trying to turn me against my father?" Rowena ignored the questions. "If you don't agree to my terms, I'll make sure everyone knows about your problems." "What problems?" Baxter frowned. "Your panic attacks. about the pills you take, about how you sometimes can't get out of bed because you're depressed. Her voice was sweet, but her eyes were cold. Do you think clients would want to do business with a travel agency whose owner is mentally unstable? I could hardly contain my anger. Baxter did suffer from anxiety, especially in recent years. Now I understood why. But using his health as a weapon was a lowlife, even for Rowena. Do you really think this is going to work? Baxter asked calmly. After we found proof of your fraud? I have my own proof, she parried. Records of your breakdowns, prescriptions for medication, the therapist's testimony, which you obtained illegally, I pointed out. Rowena threw me an annoyed look. It doesn't matter how I got them. What matters is that I have them. Baxter stared at her for a long moment, then shook his head. You know, Rowena, I've finally realized what kind of person you are, and I feel sorry for you. She laughed. Pity me? I'm the one who should feel sorry for you. Weak, dependent on your daddy, unable to stand up for yourself. Sarum, I'm not weak, Baxter countered calmly. I was gullible. That's different. And yes, I was on anxiety pills, because I lived with a woman who constantly manipulated me, made me doubt myself, and alienated me from my loved ones. But you know what? I'm not ashamed of it anymore, and I'm not afraid of anyone finding out. Rowena looked disconcerted. She clearly hadn't expected such a reaction. You're bluffing, she said uncertainly. Summon. Not at all, Baxter smiled. Publish whatever you want. It just shows what kind of man you are. He put the papers back on the table. Now I'd like you to leave my house. Your house? She was outraged. I'm not leaving here. Yes, you are, Baxter nodded, because I just sent a message to the police. They're on their way, and they'll be interested to hear about the forged documents we found. Rowena turned pale. You didn't. Baxter silently showed her the screen of his phone with the message he had sent. You have about 10 minutes to gather the essentials and leave. Or you can stay and explain to the police why you illegally changed the locks on a house registered in my name. She glared at him for a few seconds, then turned abruptly and went upstairs. We could hear her furiously throwing things into her suitcase. Did you really call the police? I asked quietly. Baxter shook his head. No, but she doesn't know that. A few minutes later, Rowena came down with 2 suitcases. This isn't over, she said, stopping at the door. I'll make you regret it. Goodbye, Rowena, Baxter replied. I wish you to find what you are looking for, whatever that may be. As the door closed behind her, we heard the squeal of tires. She was leaving in a hurry, as if the police were really after her. So that's it, Baxter said, sinking down on the couch. Or just the beginning. I sat down next to him, feeling a mixture of pride and relief. You handled yourself well, showed character. He smiled weakly. I guess he'd always had it in me. It's just, Rowena had a way of making me doubt myself about everything. Shannon, people like that will always find a way to undermine your confidence, I nodded. Your mother said it was their superpower to find someone's weaknesses. Baxter looked at me in surprise. Mom said that? Did you and she discuss such people? Of course, I smiled at the memory. Your mother had an amazing gift for recognizing false people. She would have recognized Rowena at first sight. None. Why didn't you ever tell me that? Baxter asked. When I first introduced you to Rowena? I sighed. I tried, son, but you were so infatuated with her, and I was afraid if I pushed too hard, I'd lose you. In a way, that's what Rowena wanted you to choose between us. Baxter was silent for a long moment, then put his hand on my shoulder. Never again, he said firmly. Sharon, never again will anyone come between us. The next few days were filled with legal procedures, meetings with lawyers, and reorganizing the company. Baxter bought out Perkins' entire stake and began to clean up the business. He fired several employees loyal to Perkins and hired new ones. Rowena did not give up easily. She hired an aggressive attorney and filed a countersuit demanding huge compensation. But when Prescott presented all the evidence of her adultery and fraud, even her lawyer advised her to accept Baxter's terms. In the end, she received monetary compensation, much less than she had demanded, but still a substantial amount. The house, company, and most of the assets remained with Baxter. The divorce was formalized in 3 months, record time for such complicated cases. Perkins avoided jail time, but his reputation in Phoenix business circles was ruined. The last we heard of him, he had moved to California to start over. Rowena's parents never contacted Baxter after that memorable night. Apparently, they chose to forget about their daughter's failed marriage and move on. 6 months after the divorce, Baxter sold the large house he lived in with Rowena and bought a cozy cottage in a quieter neighborhood. I helped him with the move, and we spent evenings unpacking boxes and putting things in their new places. You know, he said one day as we sat on the veranda of his new house, watching the sunset, I never really felt at home in that big house. It's always been her house, not mine. And here? I asked. He looked around, smiling. It's already better here, especially when you come over. I nodded, feeling warm in my chest. I'm glad we're closer again, son. I've missed it. Me too, Dad. Me too. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun disappear over the horizon, coloring the Phoenix sky in shades of pink and purple. Life hadn't gotten any easier after Rowena left. Baxter still had sleepless nights, anxiety attacks, self-doubt. The company required constant attention, especially after Perkins left. But something had fundamentally changed in our lives. We were a family again. Again, we could trust each other, support each other, be honest with each other. That was the most important thing. One day, about a year after that fateful cake party, we happened to meet Rowena at a restaurant downtown. She was with some man, well-dressed, but with a predatory look reminiscent of Perkins. When she saw us, she froze for a moment, then turned away, pretending not to notice. Do you want to leave? I asked Baxter, seeing his face tense. He shook his head. No, it's just a person from the past. She has no power over us anymore. We continued eating our lunch, ignoring her presence. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed that she cast a few glances in our direction, full of a mixture of anger and jealousy. But Baxter was right. She no longer had power over us. Later, as we left the restaurant, I asked my son, do you ever regret it about marrying her? Baxter was silent for a long time, looking up at the starry sky. No, he said at last. I can't regret something that made me who I am today, even if the journey was painful. I nodded, understanding. Life is rarely simple or straightforward. It's full of unexpected twists and turns, painful lessons, and difficult decisions. But it is these trials that shape us, make us stronger, wiser, deeper. Looking back now, I see that disastrous cake party was not the end, but the beginning. The beginning of a new chapter in our lives. A chapter where toxic relationships, manipulation, and lies have no place. Where we can finally be ourselves without fear of judgment or rejection. Baxter is still working on himself, on his company, on his life. I'm still struggling with age, with joint pain, with memories of the past. We're still learning to be a family all over again, after so many years apart. But we're doing it together now, and that's what matters most. And Rowena? She continues her game with new partners, new victims. People like her rarely change, but her power over us ended the moment we decided not to live a lie anymore. Sometimes I think about the day the cake flew to the floor, when I stood up and said those fateful words, well, it's time to tell the truth about my sister-in-law. It was probably the bravest thing I've ever done in my life, and certainly one of the most important. Because the truth, no matter how bitter, is always liberating. And sometimes you have to lose something, even something that seems valuable, to find what is truly important.